Hey, this is Pastor Bunjee Garrett, and I want to take some time today to present you with another word of encouragement. Well, it's the 13th day of Black History Month, and so I wanted to take this opportunity to consider the racist history of gun control here in the United States of America. Now, with this as the focus, we should look back to that notorious Dred Scott decision of 1857. It was actually March 6, 1857. That's when the Democratic majority U.S. Supreme Court issued the ruling that African Americans were not and could not be citizens of the United States. And while we can rejoice in knowing that that decision was nullified 11 years later, when Republicans under the leadership of Lincoln passed the 14th Amendment, which granted citizenship to anyone born or naturalized in the United States and regardless of their race. And so we applaud that decision. But now, before I get too far ahead of myself, it's important to note that 7 out of the 9 justices who were seated on the bench of the U.S. Supreme Court in 1857, they were Democrats. And listen, these were the same 7 Democrats who, in the name of justice, decided that African Americans were not and could not be citizens of our great nation. That's right. It was the Democrat majority there on the Supreme Court who unjustly decided to withhold the unalienable rights that our Creator has bestowed upon every individual regardless of race. And while it's true that Chief Justice Roger Taney, he issued that decision which would keep Black Americans from citizenship, he also used this same case to warn his Democrat constituents about the connection between citizenship and gun ownership. Here's how Chief Justice Roger Taney put it during his Dred Scott decision, and I quote him here. It would give to persons of the Negro race who were recognized as citizens in any one state of the Union the right to enter every other state whenever they pleased, singly or in companies, without pass or passport, and without obstruction, to sojourn there as long as they pleased, to go where they pleased at every hour of the day or night, without molestation, unless they committed some violation of law for which a white man would be punished. And it would give them the full liberty of speech in public and in private upon all subjects upon which its own citizens might speak, to hold public meetings upon political affairs, and to keep and carry arms wherever they went. That's right. The Democrats who were concerned about this citizenship of Black Americans, they were concerned that if they provided citizenship to Black Americans, then they would also receive the constitutional right to keep and bear arms. And if after becoming citizens, they started to exercise their Second Amendment rights, well, they might go and cause some trouble for the people who had enslaved them. Here's how Chief Justice Taney went on to explain it, and I quote again, all of this would be done in the face of the subject race of the same color, both free and slaves, and inevitably producing discontent and insubordination among them, and endangering the peace and safety of the state. More simply put, the Democrats were concerned that citizenship of Blacks would result in gun-toting Black Americans who would then begin to rise up against their former masters. It's for this reason that 7 Democrat justices on the Supreme Court, they decided to uphold slavery in the United States territories while simultaneously denying the legality of Black citizenship here in the U.S. Unfortunately for them, the Civil War began 4 years later, and it didn't take long for the abolitionists to encourage President Abraham Lincoln to enlist Black soldiers into the Union Army. For example, it was actually Frederick Douglass who insisted, and I quote here, he said, once let the Black man get upon his person the brass letters, U.S., let him get an eagle on his button and a musket on his shoulder and bullets in his pocket, and there is no power on earth which can deny that he has earned the right to citizenship. According to Douglass, no one would fight harder against the pro-slavery Democrat Confederates than Black soldiers who would be fighting for their own freedom, and he was right. By the summer of 1862, President Lincoln took the first step toward the enlistment of African Americans into the Union Army, and it was the Second Confiscation and Militia Act of 1862 which authorized the president to, and I quote here, to employ as many persons of African descent as he may deem necessary and proper for the suppression of this rebellion in such manner as he may judge best for the public welfare. Well, it was at that point in time when blacks throughout the South began forming infantry units of their own. And while these were unofficial regiments at first, they were officially mustered into service in January 1863. Well, as we all know, the Union Army went on to win the Civil War, and the Republican Party passed the Civil War amendments, which includes the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery here in America, the 14th Amendment, which gave blacks citizenship here in the U.S., and the 15th Amendment, which gave black men the right to vote. And while this was an incredible victory for the Republican abolitionists, this was also the cue for the Democrat leaders in the South to start either passing or enforcing state-level gun laws, which would keep black Americans from, carrying weapons and owning guns. Here's how David B. Coppell put it in his article, that's titled Racist Roots of Gun Control, and I quote him here. Immediately after the Civil War, Southern states enacted black codes designed to keep the ex-slaves in de facto slavery and submission. Mississippi's provision was typical: no freedman shall keep or carry firearms of any kind or any ammunition without police permission. In areas where the Ku Klux Klan took control, almost universally, the first thing done was to disarm the Negroes and leave them defenseless. That's right, the Southern states that were still being led by the Dixiecrats, they were determined to stop black Americans from enjoying their Second Amendment rights. And with this as the goal, they employed America's first gun control group, better known as the Ku Klux Klan. That's right. The Ku Klux Klan was founded in 1865, at the same time when Southern Democrats lost the Civil War. And this group ended up becoming the domestic terrorist group that was sent to disarm black Americans. And according to one article published by the History Channel, the KKK extended into almost every Southern state by 1870 and became a vehicle for white Southern resistance to the Republican Party's Reconstruction-era policies aimed at establishing political and economic equality for black Americans. Its members waged an underground campaign of intimidation and violence directed at white and black Republican leaders. Now, from this, we can see that gun control policies here in America have extremely racist roots. And it's for this reason that we should celebrate Black History Month by opposing gun control policies that the Democrat Party is still pushing, all in the name of peace and safety. Listen, our Constitution is perfectly clear about this, and the Second Amendment found within our Bill of Rights puts it plainly that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Every U.S. citizen should enjoy the God-given right to protect themselves by keeping and bearing arms. And any law that infringes upon this right, well, it's rendered unconstitutional. For example, those who call for so-called common sense gun control laws will insist that, gun owners must be a part of the militia. Are you a part of the militia? Listen, if that's the argument that you're making, I'll remind you of the 2008 Supreme Court case, better known as the District of Columbia versus Heller. And the Supreme Court in this case ruled that, and I quote here, the Second Amendment protects an individual right to possess a firearm unconnected with service in a militia and to use that arm for traditionally lawful purposes such as self-defense within the home. Well, there you have it. Listen, every American citizen should be able to have access to arms. We should be able to keep and bear arms. And not only that, but we should have the right to use the guns that we own for self-defense purposes. And listen, this ought to be true regardless of your race. Now, I realize that there are Christians who struggle with the idea of self-defense and gun ownership. And while I truly believe that we've been called to love our enemies and to do good to those who persecute us, I also believe that we've been called to provide for our families, which includes the provision of protection. And with this as the goal, I do believe that Christians have the God-given right to protect their families, and so we should exercise this God-given right. We should protect our families against those who would want to harm us. And with that being the case, we should take a stand against those who would want to disarm us. Those who want to disarm us, those who want to keep us from being able to keep and bear arms, we should take a political stand against these people. And in this way, we're able to protect our families and our Christian congregations against those who might try to stop us from fighting the good fight of faith, and all for the glory of God.